We made this.
Welcome back to the Decade, the podcast where we go back 10 years and reflect on pop culture of the time. I'm Thomas Adams, joined by Nick Hoffman.
What's up?
We are recording this episode for August 2010, but we're recording it in July because by the time this comes out, Nick and I will be very sleep deprived because we will be freshly new parents. I'm actually 2 days away as we record because of scheduled C-sections. Nick is a little more up in the air.
Yeah, I got I think the clock says 2.5 weeks or 24 days, but August 10th is the due date, so we'll see.
But I guess technically for you, anytime in the next 3 weeks it can happen.
Yeah, I mean the baby's fully
telling.
cooked. Yeah, baby's fully cooked. I mean, at this point, they're just gaining like a half pound a week. You know.
And how's the wife? How's the wife doing in this final stretch?
She's amazing, man. She's doing great. She's her usual, peppy self. She gets. She's a little more tired this last couple weeks. She's kind of back to those moments of getting exhausted, like middle of the day. But other than that, man, she's been amazing and a real trooper. And luckily, the baby's measuring it all correctly. And yeah, man, just kind of playing the waiting game at this point.
Yeah, it is. I mean, just dealing with pregnancy is such a burden in itself, but then having to deal with it on top of the pandemic and all of the other concerns that are entering the world, it's enough to worry about normally, and there's just so much other stuff that goes into it now that it really is. I know that watching my wife, I'm in awe of how they can handle the weight of that, of carrying life.
It's insane, dude. They're babies in there just punching their organs and stepping on their nerves and making room for themselves and just pushing all their insides aside like they're nothing. And yeah, man, it's
nuts.
Crazy.
And Caitlin is so we're obviously very excited to see our little bundle of joy, but I know she's just really excited to have her body back as well, and get Amelia out of her, because it's definitely been tasking thing. But yeah, we're obviously very excited about that, and we'll keep going with this, and we'll keep recording, but by the next time we do it, we'll be a little more sleep deprived, I would imagine. But for now, we're fresh and ready to go.
That's right. One last time.
So today we are going to, we normally talk about 3 topics, but I think for the sake of just keeping it tighter, we have 2 movies to talk about today that we both love a lot. I know both of these movies popped up in our first episode when we were going over our 5 favorites from 2010. We have The Other Guys and Scott Pilgrim versus the World, and 2 just really funny movies. Some of the movies we've covered for this podcast have been a little heavier, and I just had a lot of fun laughing with these 2 movies that I think are just such a joy to watch.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, so we'll talk about those later in the episode, and we will cover a little bit of the 2010 Emmy Awards. There's not quite enough there for us to do a full segment on that because, for one, many of the shows we've just not seen. But that did happen in August 2010, and I think there's some stuff that's worth referencing to just kind of note what television awards were like before streaming. Because now I feel like Netflix and Amazon and Hulu dominates the sort of quote unquote prestige television. But back then, networks were still kind of dominating what was successful in the television realm. But before we get into that, let's hit on some of what we've been watching in the past few weeks between recordings. I know that when it came out on Disney Plus, we both watched Hamilton. I guess it was recorded back in 2016, the like sensational Broadway musical that was filmed with anticipation of coming out in theaters in fall of 2021. But with the COVID-19 pandemic, they bumped it up and not recorded, but basically edited this filmed version for streaming and released it on Disney Plus in time for 4th of July. And Nick, what did you and Kat think about Hamilton?
Like jaw to the floor most of the time. I was completely in awe of what an incredible production it was. I would say it took me like 10 minutes or so to like get used to the fact that I'm watching a Broadway musical in my living room, which is not, I don't think, really a way I've ever watched a Broadway show before, especially in this age. So it took me a minute to like get used to that fact. And then there were, I'd never seen the structure of a Broadway musical like this before, where they're just immediately start, their rap verses, and they go into the history of Alexander Hamilton. And yeah, it was kind of bizarre at first, but like in a good way. I guess I felt a little uncomfortable, and then I just really fell into it hard, like after that initial like 10 minutes, but really, really enjoyed it, especially when the King George comes on. I mean,
that's hilarious.
Was my favorite part. Like immediately, yeah. I loved his song, and I just thought he was funny as hell. And then he immediately was like, "Holy shit, it's the guy from Mindhunter! That's the Mindhunter guy." Which it was a total shock. And then Kat was just like, "Yeah, oh my god, you're right. I never would have guessed that. I would have been watching this the whole time, thinking like, who is this guy?"
It was kind of jarring to me because when I recognized him as the Mindhunter guy, I then had to look him up on IMDb and put two and two together that he's also the voice of Kristoff in Frozen, which
I've never seen.
Very surprising to me, but
I didn't know
that was wild.
I didn't know he had this like beautiful voice and was this Broadway star, and he was any part of this production. So. Because I love him in Mindhunter. I think he's amazing and perfect for that role. So seeing him just pop up, he went from just the guy from Mindhunter to he moved so high up on my list as like actors that now I want to see in more stuff. Jonathan Groff, right?
Yeah, like you want to see what he does next.
Yeah, I'm like, I immediately went after I watched Hamilton, and I was like, what is this guy working on? Like, is there a season 3 to Mindhunter? Is he working on a movie? Like, I need to see more of this dude. Like, this guy's got so much dynamic range as far as like acting, and then he has an incredible voice. So yeah, I look forward to seeing him in future stuff. And when I looked it up, I realized, he's going to be in The Matrix 4, which I don't think I really care about that much, but I guess now I do a little bit more that he's in it. So
yeah, it's something that I've never been like. That's always been kind of a thing about me, is that I've never been gigantic into the Matrix series, but I mean, I'll watch it if it's good. Yeah, I think what I took away from watching it was, obviously this was filmed back in 2016. But so many of the faces I felt like I had recognized from other things. And obviously I knew Lin-Manuel Miranda.
For sure,
because, he's the face of Hamilton and he's in so many interviews. But some of the other members of the cast, I'm like, I know that face from somewhere. And it's just from them becoming bigger stars off of the success of Hamilton. And I knew this was a show that it was always too expensive for me to see when it was here in Atlanta, and when I had opportunity to see it live, it was just too pricey. But I knew I would see it someday, so I avoided it as much as possible. I hadn't heard the soundtrack. I knew none of the songs. I really knew nothing about it because I wanted that first experience to be organic. And then when we got this opportunity through Disney Plus, I think it's really the perfect way to experience the show, because you're getting that original cast And you're seeing like what made it such a special thing back then and why it was so expensive and why so many people wanted to see it. And the cast is just sensational. I was completely blown away by it. Leslie Odom Jr., who plays Aaron Burr, just blew me away how phenomenal I thought his performance was. And it's a guy, I knew his face from other things that he's done since. And I think with obviously how popular this production for Disney Plus was, you're only going to see those actors get more opportunities because now the whole world knows their faces, because we've all seen it through watching this show on streaming. I watched it the day it came out, and then one day while I was working, I played it again and just watched it again in the background because I love the music so much. I had the music in my head for probably 2.5 solid weeks. I was absolutely hooked on the soundtrack. Like I said, I'd never heard any of the songs before.
Yeah, man.
And
No, we were singing. I was definitely singing that King George like all day. The next day I was like da 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 da. And yeah, I was saying to Kat how, oh man, we could listen to the Hamilton soundtrack and sing it along with Lizzie, you know, later on. And I was like, wow, what is
yeah, that's the other thing, man.
Moment.
That play had moments that, as someone that's going to be a parent soon, just wrecked me, because there's obviously the number Dear Theodosia, which is like an ode to parenthood. You have Aaron Burr singing to his daughter about, you know, the way he wants to transform the world for his child, and then Alexander Hamilton singing to his son. And those two characters are kind of mirrored in that shared experience of becoming parents. And that number really took me back, just as processing what's going on in my life at the current moment. And then, you know, there's obviously some songs later on in the musical, without spoiling too much, that just deal with difficult things that come along with parenthood. And there's a moment in the play where it's a really tragic moment about I'll spoil a little bit about losing a child, like the experience of a parent losing a child. And just coincidentally, during that moment when that song was occurring, I was feeling Caitlin's stomach, just because I do that periodically for the past couple of months. Right. And Amelia kicked me like as that song was playing. And I just couldn't help but have like tears come to my eyes, because it was just like this weird, you know, this weird like mix of emotions, processing, you know, what the musical is trying to convey with what's going on in my life at the current moment. And it's very overwhelming. And I was just so moved by the show. And it's one of my favorite pieces of media that I think I've consumed maybe in the past few years. It just really fantastic, I thought.
Yeah, brilliant releasing on Disney Plus's part, and because we watched it on the 4th of July that night. Like, what's more American than watching Hamilton be rapped to you in these incredible hip hop verses,
these
in
numbers,
this great script? Because there was a lot of stuff I didn't know about. I didn't know about the division between Hamilton and Burr and the way they were kind of like frenemies. You know, I didn't know that story very well, and I didn't know anything about his family or either one of their families. So I thought it was very engaging. And I mean, there's always stuff that they kind of skimmed over that they had to. I mean, again, you're talking about like a 2.5 hour production over one of America's greatest stories and one of the most pivotal stories in our history. So yeah, man, it was a great watch. The older I get, the more I love musicals. I've always kind of loved them since I was a kid, but I've seen a few shows on Broadway, but to have the technology now to just sit in your living room or wherever it is you watch and enjoy television, to be able to see a production like that, because it was shot extremely well. Like, just they had phenomenal talent shooting this production,
Yeah, for sure.
and for the cast to just like, I mean, yeah, I mean, I'm sure they nail it every night. They have to. They were just so perfect. Like, it was just a perfect production.
They definitely on this particular night they played to those cameras in a way that really helped translate this
Yeah,
production.
that rotating stage, like the way they
Yep.
filmed that, um, and then just like, what, I don't know what cameras they shot it on, but it looked fantastic, and they were able to get that Dolby Vision HDR look. I mean, I know it was at least HD, but it looked phenomenal.
Yeah.
And so I was really impressed by the production aspect of it as well. So,
Yeah,
and
I
then
agree with that. I think you're right that it was a little jarring in the first couple of numbers to like wrap your head around the idea of watching a stage production on my screen. But I think the moment that and this is a testament to the show as well, because I'm sure it would have felt just as transfixing had I been in the audience watching it on stage. But during the number Satisfied, where they kind of rewind the story to tell it from a different perspective, and the way they executed that transition of going from one number into the next and
yeah,
making you kind of experience the story's intention with rewinding that section of the story, it like I just like kind of like you said, I had my jaw on the floor through that whole number because I'm like, I can't believe how well this is working on screen. Like, I'm watching this production on my TV and I'm just like I'm glued to it. I'm so hooked on what they're executing here from a production standpoint, not just from a story standpoint. But yeah, I'm so glad we have it on Disney Plus because I can't wait to come back to this and just watch it every now and again when I feel like it. And we don't always get that with Broadway productions. It's cool that we have that now.
yeah, man, yeah, it was definitely a unique experience, and yeah, I hope we, you know, you're always looking for the silver lining in these troubling times with the pandemic and everything. So hopefully this brings more high quality productions to our television screens, you know, in our homes in the future. So
We can only hope. It was certainly an innovative way to bring this like popular piece of pop culture to a wider audience. And I would imagine that we'll see more of that in the future as a thanks to this. Once COVID goes away and we can have stage productions again, you know, regardless, it'll be nice because some people can't always afford the luxury of seeing a Broadway production. But yeah, we can move on from Hamilton. We have a couple other things. I would say that the month of July, no, I guess June also included in this. It's been kind of the best stretch of time since the COVID outbreak for new content, like 2020 related material that, you know, isn't, you know, not stuff from 2010 that we're going back to that's been available to us for 10 years. But a couple other things that we checked out, we both watched Palm Springs on Hulu, which I think we both said before we jumped on here that probably the best thing that we've seen this year since
I
all
watched it
this
opening.
happened.
I watched it opening night. Opening night on Hulu.
Yeah, me too. Me too. I was so excited for it. Just I love Andy Samberg. I'm really in the pocket for him
Yeah,
and
for
his
sure.
brand of comedy. I always find it funny, whether it's Pop Star, Never Stop, Never Stopping, or he did this thing on Netflix, I think a year ago, called like The Bash Brothers. I don't know if you ever watched that.
No,
It was
wait.
this it was this 30-minute special that was
wait.
like a Lonely Island musical montage about Mark McGuire and Jose Canseco.
Oh yeah. Okay. No, I think I think I watched some of that. It was so absurd.
It was so absurd, but
Uh,
I was like, this is just I don't know. I'm just impressed by the amount with which he goes for it in
yeah.
his brand of comedy.
I mean, pop star. I saw obviously, and I've seen all his movies. I mean, dude, the Hot Rod is one of my all time favorite comedies. I love that movie so much.
Yeah.
So yeah, I'm always on board to see him in a comedy. And I thought this was more to his strengths, where he was. It was a perfect role for him, and he killed it, man. And the girl too. Which I should have this pulled up. I don't know if you had her name right away, but
Yeah, Kristen Milioti. She's
she was fantastic.
yeah,
I thought,
she's best known, I think, for in How I Met Your Mother. She plays the titular mother in the final season of that show. But she's someone that I like in everything that I've seen her in. And I think this movie was really a great showcase for the Andy Samberg appeal as a romantic comedy lead. I thought the romance element of this movie really worked, especially when you consider this is one that I don't want to spoil, because I think that this movie is best experienced fresh.
We should talk.
So
yeah, definitely shouldn't give anything away here.
I would say that like the romantic elements of this movie work a lot, mainly because I think thematically this movie ties very well into a lot of the things that we're experiencing now in this quarantine world. That I think I said to a friend, it's a movie about how we have this magnetic draw that tells us we need to be with someone else. Like, we need connection in this world, despite the fact that the universe is basically yelling at you. The safest thing for you to do is isolate and have nobody close to you in your life. Isolate as much as possible, bring no one in, and yet we can't help ourselves but seek connection. And I think this movie kind of tells that story in a beautiful way, on top of being just absolutely hilarious.
Yeah, totally agree. Loved it. Be fun to talk about 10 years from now. Tune in, folks. 10 years from now. Well, that's when we'll spoil it.
Yeah, I think in 10 years we're going to struggle for content, so maybe we'll just do like 10 episodes on Palm Springs.
I don't think so, man. I think we're going to have some good stuff to talk about. I think we'll be okay.
It's going to be interesting to look back on. The other thing, I brought this up before we jumped on. Have you watched Dads on Apple TV Plus?
No.
So I had this recommended to me by a lot of people because obviously I'm about to be a dad, and I think this was released for Father's Day, and it is Bryce Dallas Howard, who most people will know from the Jurassic World movies. She's the daughter of.
Okay, yeah, I know I recognized it. Yeah, I saw like an interview with her on the Today Show with my Today family that I hang out with in the morning, and I saw her
with Hoda and Savannah.
Yeah, Savannah and Craig and Carson. Man, they're my favorite. I get up in the morning and just drink coffee and watch them for like 3 hours. It's pathetic.
There's nothing wrong. That's my entire childhood, is my parents waking up with the Today Show, and
I know.
That's why one of the many reasons I was devastated about the Matt Lauer news, because he was such a staple in my upbringing every morning. Yeah. But Dads was a very sweet, pretty short documentary about basically just, for those that don't know, Bryce Dallas Howard is the daughter of Ron Howard, who's a famous director, in addition to being known for being the star of Happy Days, which was like the biggest sitcom in the 70s. She basically brings together a lot of she brings together a lot of big names like Jimmy Kimmel, Jimmy Fallon, Will Smith, Judd Apatow, Hassan Minaj, Patton Oswalt, a lot of just big names that are dads, and talks to them about what it's like to be a dad. on top of also interviewing these very unique cases around the world of these dads that have basically been thrust into the role of either being a full-time stay-at-home parent or maybe taking care of an adopted child or, some other unique way of becoming a parent. I mean, obviously it was very affecting on me because of my state in life. I thought it was really moving and just kind of a nice testament to parenthood and what it's like nowadays as the stereotypical role of, oh, the dad goes to work and puts bread on the table, and how that idea is evolving and dads are becoming much more involved in the home life. And it was a really nice story about that. Let's see, what else do we have? We have the other guys we're going to talk about today. So I think you mentioned you watched Eurovision Song Contest, which is the latest Will Ferrell project. You have any thoughts to share on that?
Yeah, it was good for what it was. It was good enough. It was funny. It wasn't like one of my favorite Will Ferrell movies or anything, but way too long. It was too long, man. Like why do I need over 2 hours of this nonsense? I mean, it's funny, but like I thought it could have been cut like at least 30 minutes shorter and a little tighter, but I mean, it was entertaining.
Yeah, I have to agree. I thought that, like we were talking about with Hamilton earlier, I kind of have a soft point for musicals, and this movie, in an odd way, is a musical because it's about this singing competition, and Will Ferrell and Rachel McAdams are this musical group in Iceland that's trying to enter the Eurovision Song Contest, and it's very silly, but I found it harmless enough. Like I enjoyed it. I wasn't
Yeah.
on the floor laughing or anything, but it made me smile a couple times. I thought it was a lot better than some of Will Ferrell's more recent efforts that I've just not been a fan of.
Yeah, I don't know. I haven't seen a good. Yeah, it has been a while since a good Will Ferrell movie popped up. I mean, like I don't watch the Daddy's Home or whatever. That looks terrible.
Yeah, I didn't see that. I did see The House, which I thought was just atrocious. It was
Yeah, it looked really bad.
him and Amy Poehler, and that was really bad. He did Get Hard with Kevin Hart that I thought was really bad. And
Yeah, it looked really bad.
This wasn't bad. Like this was, fine. And Rachel McAdams, I think she's just endlessly charming.
Yeah, she was really good in it. She
Yeah.
she took it more seriously than she needed to, but it was
yeah, like she's in Game Night, which I don't know if you've seen Game Night, but I think she's really hilarious in that movie.
Yeah, Game Night's great. I like that movie a lot.
Yeah, it's really funny. And she does kind of a similar bit in this movie where she's just like she really has a good sense of comedic timing and like breaking out of character at the right moment to like sell a joke. I think there's like a moment in this movie where some characters die, and she like it benefits her in a way, and she kind of like breaks the tension to talk about how like, oh, this is really great for me, but oh, they're also dead, and she kind of like sells that in a way that I think is like is funny, and not every actress would be able to sell that in a way that works, in my opinion. But yeah, I think Eurovision, maybe I'm just easier on movies given the state of the world, but I enjoyed it for what it was. And we're going to talk about later in the episode, when we wrap up the other guys, we'll cover our 5 favorite Will Ferrell movies. Eurovision's not going to make that list, but I was happy to see him being in something that was sweet and easygoing again.
Yeah, and it was nice to see the old man Pierce Brosnan. He was looking very just beautiful old man.
Yeah, he's aging pretty well.
Yeah, I could have watched him honestly a a lot longer. But I didn't think he had enough screen time for as long as the movie was. Like I could have had more Pierce in it. He was great.
I want to shout out Dan Stevens, who played, God, I forget his name, but he was like the Russian flamboyant rival of the contest that was trying to seduce Rachel McAdams, and I thought he gave a pretty funny performance.
Yeah, he was kind of like the Ben Stiller of the movie.
Yeah. And also, there's a song in the movie called "Ya Ya Ding Dong" that not the worst song in the world. It was stuck in my head for a while.
Yeah. Yeah, ding dong, yeah, something like that. It was funny.
Yeah, so I think that's gonna wrap up what we've been watching in the meantime. Let's transition now into our decade rewind.
Let's go back to the decade.
So before we get into our reviews of other guys and Scott Pilgrim, I'm just gonna mention a little bit the 2010 Emmy Awards. We talked a bit about TV in our first episode when we were kind of doing like a generic coverage of 2010 at large. And I think we both mentioned like 30 Rock for comedy and Breaking Bad for drama was what I would say are like our two big shows that we were drawn to during this particular time. Like, am I accurate in saying that?
30 Rock for sure. I've never watched Breaking Bad, but I understand.
You never
the
watched
phenomenon.
Breaking Bad.
I understand the phenomenon.
Was it Mad Men then that you brought up?
Mad Men, that's the big show that Kat loves, which I've watched like some of the first season, but I also have not really watched much of that. At the time, I think I've said this before, I wasn't really into watching a whole lot of TV, so I don't even think I was. I love 30 Rock, but I watched it later, especially as I
like after it was airing.
And I certainly wasn't watching the Emmys, so no, I didn't give a shit about television in 2010, even though there was some great stuff.
Yeah, I think most of this shit I found later in my life. Like Modern Family wins the Emmy for comedy series that year. And is that a show that you've watched much of?
Nah, not.
I recommend it. Phil Dunphy is the kind of dad that I aspire to be, and I think
is that the Married with Children Al Bundy guy? Who's the?
No, that's he's like the patriarch of the family, and Phil is played by Ty Burrell. He is the Al Bundy's son-in-law.
Okay. Gotcha.
That show just ended its run, and Caitlin and I, when quarantine started, went back and watched the first like 6 seasons or so. I think it went for 11 seasons. We watched the first 6 seasons, and I think that show still holds up as really funny. Yeah, other things of note, Mad Men does win Outstanding Drama Series. Beats like Breaking Bad, Dexter, The Good Wife, Lost, and True Blood. And I've honestly only ever seen Breaking Bad of that list. I don't know how much of that you've covered.
Dexter.
Dexter. That's about
it. Dexter was garbage at the end of its run. I think what season would that have been for Dexter?
That would have been season 4.
Oh well, no, season 4 was good because it was with John Lithgow. So we're right after that season. It sucks, but that was a really dark season, but really good. So that was the last great year for Dexter. So good year for TV then. I was into Dexter for sure. I don't know if I was watching it real time or if I watched it later. I might have watched season 4 in that same year, but I had to like catch up on seasons 1, 2, and 3 before I watched season 4. So.
Yeah, I'm going through this now, and holy moly. Modern Family wins comedy series like starting in 2010 for basically 5 consecutive seasons, which is kind of insane. And for drama,
Veep did something like that, right?
Veep won for a lot of seasons in a row. And, it kept beating 30 Rock, which I would say, in my opinion, 30 Rock is the better show, even though I really very much enjoy Modern Family. like 30 Rock is like a smarter brand of comedy.
Yeah,
But
for sure.
it was like drama. Like Mad Men wins a couple years in a row, but you also had Breaking Bad that would win, and Homeland when that came around eventually. Comedy, you also had Curb Your Enthusiasm and The Office and Glee, which I definitely watched The Office. Like that's been just something that's I feel like a lot of people have watched The Office. It's an extremely popular show.
That's definitely one thing about the Emmys I don't like. I've watched them now, like over the years in this past decade, and yeah, for example, I mean, I don't have anything against Veep or any of these shows that are so good that they, I guess, deserve to win. And Juliet Lewis-Dreyfus wins Best Actress like however many years in a row. Like I find that ridiculous. I'm like, there is, especially in the last 5 to 8 years, whatever. There's so much content, and you can't tell me
That
that
she's the best one every time. Yeah.
or the show is like the best show. It's ridiculous. I'm always like, why would I watch this anymore when they're just gonna give the award to the same show every year, like, and the same actress or actor. I'm like, this is dumb.
I've definitely had that feeling too. As far as award shows go, I'm I'm much more into the Oscars just because that fits more so what I pay attention to, and I watch most of those movies. And I would say like nowadays with the Emmys, because there's so much streaming content, I'm generally familiar with most of the stuff that's up for nominations. But I think like back then they had a habit of just repeating the same stuff over and over again, like you were saying.
Yeah, I'll watch it now for entertainment purposes and just have something to talk shit about. But that's about the extent for me with the Emmys. I don't know.
I want
It's
to
like
look.
with most award shows, I don't think are very important. The Oscars are obviously the most fun, but yeah, it doesn't really matter.
They're still intending to air the Emmys in September of this year, which I don't know how that's going to go. Like maybe they'll have some sort of broadcast, but it's
Yeah, they'll figure something. Sure,
certainly not going to be live on a stage.
Nope.
Yeah. But I think that's enough of TV for now. Let's get into, what do we say? We're going to talk about Scott Pilgrim first?
Yeah, I'm good either way. But yeah, sounds good to me.
Yeah, let's get into an in-depth review of Scott Pilgrim versus the World.
Scott Pilgrim?
Hi, I was thinking about asking you out, but then I realized how stupid that would be. So do you want to go out sometime?
If we're gonna date, you may have to defeat my 7 evil exes.
You have 7 evil ex-boyfriends?
Pretty much.
Prepare to feel the wrath of the League of Evil Exes. How's life? He seems nice.
You know this girl?
It was just a phase.
You had a sexy face?
I was just a little bi-curious.
Well, I'm a little bi-furious.
We all have baggage.
I don't care about any of that stuff.
Step up your game, Scott. You want to fight me for her? Why would you want to do that?
Because I'm in love with her. Garlic bread is my favorite food. I could eat it for every meal.
You get fat.
No, why would I get fat?
Bread makes you fat.
Bread makes you fat?
Rated PG-13, August 13th.
All right, Scott Pilgrim versus the Worlds came out in theaters August 13th, 2010. And this movie was an absolute bomb at the box office.
Yeah.
Which is weird to think about now, because I feel like the cult following that surrounds it is quite large. Like it has a lot of fans nowadays, but I think most people found it later on after it had been in theaters. I know that I'm one of them.
Yeah, I'm one of them too. I didn't see it in the theater.
Yeah. I don't think I watched this movie until probably 2015. There was something about it that it did not seem like it was going to be like in my wheelhouse of interests. It was very out there and quirky. But once I was introduced to it, I really love this movie. And I put it in my top 5 for 2010, back when we had that discussion in March. And I think to this day, I wouldn't go as far to call it one of the best movies of the decade, but I think this movie is one that I find to be the most fun of movies that came out in the 2010s, because
Yeah.
it moves with such a kinetic pace, and from scene to scene, joke to joke, it's just like nonstop joke action, and it really just has you hooked from like the first couple of scenes, like from the moment that that credit sequence happens when their band Sex Bomb plays the first song, and we have like the opening credits with the comic book graphics and
Incredible opening credits. Like I was thinking that
Yeah.
the moment I turned it on last night, I was like, wow, it's such a great intro to a movie. And the way it starts out by, he's dating the girl Knives, that she's a 17-year-old high school girl, and she's 5 years younger than him. And that's like the very first thing you learn about Scott Pilgrim is he's dating a high schooler. And that moment where she just like stares at the band in love, this immediate love just in her eyes, and the way it pans out as they're playing, and them on the couch, and the Scott Pilgrim vs. the World logo, and then comes down with all the people involved with the film, and the music is phenomenal. Yeah, it was great intro credits for sure.
Yeah, and it really captures the tone of the movie, because it like gets you in off the jump. Like, this is going to be really silly. We're going to do things in an unconventional way, because the character introductions play like a video game, which, Scott Pilgrim is based off a series of graphic novels. I don't know if they're called graphic novels, probably more like comic books, from an artist known as Brian Lee O'Malley. And, it's like this comic origin, but it's very much rooted in like the video game aesthetic, where I think about games like Street Fighter or Tekken, where it's like you pick your player and then you fight. And that's how this game is designed, as the character Scott Pilgrim has to defeat his love interest's 7 evil exes. Each round is kind of set up like this like progression in a video game. And they set that tone from the beginning, because like the moment Scott is introduced, he has this like box that gives you his stats, where it's like age 23, like, and then it like gives you like other random facts about him, which is what happens when you play one of these fighting games, is that you're like scrolling through characters and you have this like tiny box of information where it's like, is this even relevant? I don't know, but that's part of like how the aesthetic works. But it's just really creative to me and inventive. I've long said this is the best video game movie ever made, even though it's not explicitly based on a video game. It is a video game. Yeah, it captures what it's like to play a video game, and it does it in the film medium in a really exciting way.
Yeah, and the editing, I think, is really what sets this movie apart from good to great to really a classic. That you got these guys who are they're like Edgar Wright's editing dudes, especially Jonathan Amos, but Paul Notchless too. I hope I'm saying his last name right, Paul. But they're both a duo of editors that really, I think, make this movie, because if it's not for the editing, the movie doesn't work. I mean, all the performances are great, but the way this thing just, like you mentioned earlier, the way it's like just so precisely
constructed,
and like it just breezes along and takes you along for the ride. And I don't know what's the runtime on this movie. It's
I don't think it's super long. It's
an hour and 52 minutes. I mean, that's almost 2 hours. Yeah. It does not feel like that, dude. I remember, and every time I've watched it, and again, like I think last night, it was probably my 4th or 5th time seeing this movie, and yeah, man, it just breezes by so fast every time. And and same thing with Baby Driver, same thing with other Edgar Wright movies.
And he's really known for that.
Really, some of the best editors in the business, in my opinion. Just seeing all those movies, and
I have written down here in my notes, the editing is what makes the jokes land. And I think it's absolutely right. Like his editing style that he develops with his guys are like so important on making that visual aesthetic of the movie work. And I even like I wrote down a specific joke that comes early in the movie where it's after Scott has seen Ramona Flowers for the first time and this girl's going to become his love interest. And he like walks up to this guy at a party and he goes, "Do you know a girl with hair like this?" And he holds up a picture. And in like less than a second, it cuts to that guy and he goes, "Yes, that's Ramona Flowers." And he says it like in an instant. And it's like in concept, it's not really a funny joke, but the way they edit it to have, he like holds up this picture that's like not specific at all. It's like this scribbling of,
it's like chicken
of
scratch.
a head. It's chicken scratch, a head with hair. And like in like less than a second, they cut to the guy who like has the girl's name just like ready to go. And it's like, that's so funny to me, but the editing is what sells that joke. Because if they don't do it in such a quick pace, then it it doesn't have the same level of humor.
Yeah, I like how it jumps through time, and like he'll be experiencing kind of just floating through his own reality for a few seconds and not really paying attention, kind of half there, half not, and he kind of, and then it goes into this dream sequence, where Ramona Flowers, skates by him in a desert, and she says it's it's fine, it's just a dream, and then he wakes up and it's like the next day. So it just, the way it transitions from present time, he's hanging out with knives on the street, to, oh, now I'm in a dream, and then, oh, I wake up and I'm in the next day. It's pretty cool the way they did those transitions. And
it's very much like not rooted in reality, right? Like the movie makes a point to tell you that this is a fantasy. A lot of what's happening is in the character's head, and you kind of just have to like go with it from that perspective. But the emotions feel very real, I feel like.
Yeah.
I think
will say,
like, go ahead.
I was going to say the one thing that was different for me in this viewing, because I guess I hadn't seen it in a few years, and I saw this movie probably in 2012, 2013 maybe, so a few years after it came out. I really liked it then, and I've loved it ever since. But I did find, I don't know if this is coming with age, I'm 36, about to be a father, been married for coming on a couple years, and I found the characters for the first 20 or 30 minutes or so a little annoying. Like they kind of annoyed me. Like they're whiny, and all this angst and all these problems that like really aren't those bigger problems. And his issues with like breaking up with his high school girlfriend that's too young for him anyway, and then too immature. I was just like, oh my God, this Scott Pilgrim he's just like the drummer, Kim, right? Is that her name? He's such a jerk, and all the girls are screaming at him like, no, you have no right to go and date Ramona Flowers. I forbid you. You're terrible. You treat all these women like shit. You go out with one, you break up with them. You go out with another, you break up with them. So yeah, I found them really annoying for a minute. I was like, oh, man, I don't know. Maybe my head wasn't there. I didn't feel like listening to their issues, but
I'm really
quickly,
really glad you said that, because it ties in really well with a note that I had made. I listened to, on the Big Picture podcast, they had an interview with Edgar Wright to celebrate the film's 10-year anniversary. And they were talking about like the thematic, like different thematic elements to the story. And he said the phrase that Scott Pilgrim versus the World is a deconstruction of adolescent obsessions. And I think that plays in perfectly to what you're saying about how these characters open up so whiny, like concerned about these things that just aren't concerning.
Yeah.
And, like you mentioned earlier, like from moment one, like Knives is this like 17-year-old girl who walks in the door and she's just infatuated by this band. Like she hears this band play and she's obsessed. And Scott sees this girl at a party and he's obsessed. And it's this deconstruction of how when we are young, before we've matured as adults and reached a stage in our lives where, you know, we learn to prioritize and let foolish things go, how these things that don't really matter just consume us and, you know, drive our desires. And I think this is a cool movie about that idea, because Scott Pilgrim is kind of an asshole.
Yeah, totally.
He cheats on his girlfriend. He is only concerned with himself. He's kind of a what's the word? He's a fuck up, because he's living with his friend, not contributing on rent, like sleeping in his friend's bed is like part of the joke, and just has nothing going on for himself. And yet he seems to think very highly of himself. He seems to think of himself as talented, and
well, he's hung up on this girl that broke up with him a year ago, and he can't get over it, and like, woe is me, like, you know, get over it, dude.
Which is what I think makes the ending of the film so cool, is how, like, you know, throughout the movie you have all these jokes relating to different video game power-ups.
Yeah, he earns the title of self-respect.
Yeah, exactly. Scott has earned the power of self-respect, and it's just such a funny gag to like talk about the character's journey while also tying it to the video game joke. But yeah, I think it deconstructs a lot of these. What's the word I'm looking for? Like, I think the Scott character has a lot of toxic masculinity in a way that's maybe not as overt as the Mark Wahlberg character and the other guys that we'll talk about later.
Right. It's a little more, I mean, yeah, there's a little more innocence to it, right? I mean, it's very much a coming of age film, right? It's like quintessential coming of age, really one of the most unique coming of age movies and tales, stories that we've ever seen on screen. And yeah, I don't think he means to be the way he is. He just is the way he is because he's, you know, still in his early 20s and he's still trying to figure it all out, and he's just being a real wino about it, you know? So but yeah, no, he grows, he learns, and yeah, as the movie goes on, I'm like, this movie is just fantastic. It's so entertaining. All the different, you know, ex boyfriends and or exes. Sorry, let's not say boyfriends.
Yeah, gotta
exes.
get it right.
They're all so great, and so it's just like so well casted, and I think he learns a lesson with each one, and the different stages in life that Ramona was in, which is where these exes are coming from. You mentioned toxic, was it masculinity? Yeah. Which is definitely a factor there, but again, a little more innocent, right? Than compared to something like a grown man acting like this would be unacceptable.
Yeah, and it's very subtle, I think, and you know, there's this idea in a lot of romantic comedies, about not even romantic comedies, romantic dramas as well, about the manic pixie dream girl, which is this like concept of the girl who exists in the movie solely to show the guy how stupid he's been, or like basically like make the like a girl that exists in a movie to solely make a man a better person, like comes around to just sort of like help save him from himself, basically. And I think that Ramona Flowers' character is a really interesting deconstruction on that idea, because one of the, you know, I know like one of the classic examples of that is the Kate Winslet character in Eternal Sunshine of the Spotless Mind. And she very notably has like this blue hair in that movie. And you have Ramona, who's constantly changing her hair color. But what's cool about Ramona is that I think that she gets a nice little arc to herself in this movie.
She's my favorite. She's my favorite character in this movie, and I mean, go ahead, but we'll have to talk about Mary Elizabeth Winstead.
I was gonna say, you know, she also gets this arc to grow and learn how to respect herself more, and you know, let someone into her life and not be so closed off and like the wall that she is when we first meet her character. And she also, like, she doesn't apologize for any of it. She is the way that she is, and she recognizes it, but she doesn't, like, you know, like, she just kind of...
She doesn't have all the answers.
Yeah, she's comfortable with who she is while also recognizing that I could stand to improve in some areas. And that's something that I think we all could hope to do with our own, whatever problems that we have in our own lives. But go ahead and talk about Mary Elizabeth Winstead, because it's just it's a great performance, and she steals a lot of the movie to me.
Yeah, she's the heart of the movie, for sure. And I think her performance it's one of those performances like of a generation where, you have this woman that plays this character so well, and she's so easy to fall in love with, right away. I think she's got this really cool persona about her, and her character's kind of punk rocky, and she's very independent and strong, and, the whole hair thing, like you mentioned, and she's sexy, and I just, all these wonderful factors. And, you're a guy in your early 20s, and, you're constantly, it's reeling through your head, oh man, like, how did I screw this relationship up? Or why didn't she like me, or this and that? And with her, she sort of embodies like all of these wonderful things about that time in our life where, you want to find someone to share your life with. You want to be in relationships with someone. You want to meet a girl or a guy, and you want it to be perfect, and you want to fall in love. And the way she embodies the character of Ramona Flowers is just so poetic. And I thought that she was the best part of the movie. I've thought that since the first day I saw it to last night watching it. I thought, just her performance is one of the best of the decade. One of the best I've ever seen in one of these like coming of age tales. So yeah, she's like just hypnotic and wonderful.
Yeah, I think when you're going to have a movie where the plot revolves around this idea that a guy sees a girl across a crowded room and is just completely transfixed by her from the moment he sees her, the performance needs to back that up, and hers absolutely does. Like, you completely get why Scott is infatuated by her, because she's
fighting all these crazy evil exes,
right,
with no explanation.
And she you kind of get that Scott likes himself better when he's around her. Like, she brings out these better pieces of him that's like more lovable, which is why the moment that Scott and Ramona start dating in the movie, I think the Scott character becomes instantly more likable, because you see a lot of like the, genuine good qualities that are within him. But yeah, she's great. And I think this is on a somewhat related note, but recently Entertainment Weekly, for like some sort of charity benefit, released this Zoom recording of the entire cast. Not the entire cast, some of them were missing, but the majority of the cast of the movie came together to do a virtual table read for the 10-year anniversary. And I watched that in addition to the movie, for one, because I love so many of these actors and I just like seeing them interact with each other, but just to see like how the script would translate in, that sort of medium where we're not seeing all the special effects that help support it so well. And her performance, I loved it on Zoom too. Like, I was like equally engaged in Ramona.
And she's continued to, she's still a phenomenal actress, obviously. She's done some, I think she's best. Well, she might not be best known at this point for Cloverfield. That was it. Yeah. Cloverfield Lane or whatever. I think this is, I guess, her most popular movie amongst the
10 Cloverfield Lane was a big one for her too. Yeah.
Yeah, but she was really good in that too. She's good in, I was looking at her resume here over the last 10 years, and
I've always
that one comes up. She was obviously she was John McClane's daughter, I know, in Live Free or Die Hard. I still refuse to watch A Good Day to Die Hard because it looks awful. But Swiss Army Man, 10 Cloverfield Lane.
I think the first movie that I remember her from in my adolescence was Sky High, and I don't know when that came out, but that's a movie that definitely would not have crossed your radar because of our age difference. But I think it was like maybe like 06 or 07. so I was like 14 or something like that. But I remember seeing her in that and like having a pretty big teenage crush on her from that movie.
Sky High. Yeah, let's see. I see this.
It was like
never watched. Oh yeah, but it's got Kurt Russell in it. I remember this movie. I never watched it.
Yeah, it's like a school for superheroes or something.
Yeah.
I mean, she's obviously great, and this movie has become known for handpicking so many giant A-list stars before they became A-list stars. Like Chris Evans it pops in for like one of my favorite sequences as
the
great douchebag Hollywood actor that's, you know, someone Ramona dated in high school, and he's hilarious. And this is like obviously before he becomes Captain America just 1 year later, so it's kind of funny to see that. And then of course you have Brie Larson, who's now an Oscar-winning actress. She's Captain Marvel, and she's really funny in this movie too, in a couple of scenes, like playing Scott's ex-girlfriend who's become like basically too good for everyone. She's really funny. Anna Kendrick is in this and she's funny. Kieran Culkin from Succession, he's in this.
Yeah, he's had a bit of a renaissance. Yeah, Kieran Culkin's great in it.
It's just such a wonderful cast. Like even Brandon Routh, who was Superman,
the vegan,
and then kind of disappeared as the vegan, is really funny. Oh, and the other one I love, she's not really had a big movie career, but she's been big on TV. Mae Whitman, who plays Roxy, she's also really funny. She has the whole sequence where she confronts Scott and he like punches her and she goes, "You punched me in the boob. Prepare to die." Obviously.
Yeah.
And she's just really funny.
Brie Larson, man, this is like before she blew up.
Yeah, it's before that. And the last one I want to point out is Ellen Wong, who plays Knives, who I think is also really good in this movie, and kind of a shame that it doesn't seem like she's like the one cast member that's not necessarily popped since this movie. And I mean, who knows why that is, but I think she's also really great in the scenes that she gets to do. And she kind of has a really heartwarming moment at the end where, you know, her character comes to a lot of realizations about her obsessions and learning to not be as consumed by them all the time.
Yeah, no, she was great, man. I mean, like you said, everyone in the movie's great. And yeah, every time I turn this movie on, it's a roller coaster. It's so much fun to watch. The effects are awesome. All the fight scenes are great. The music's really fantastic for it all being original music. So
yeah, that's the last thing I wanted to ask you about before we move on from this movie, because you're a bigger music guy than me. Like this type of music, does it fit well to you in terms of like the genre that it's trying to replicate?
Oh, absolutely, man. It's got that real punk rock vibe to it. Yeah, you know, I should have done more research on like how exactly they composed this soundtrack. But as far as I know, it's all original music. And
well, a lot of them are actual bands that they had.
Okay, yeah,
that they had do these songs.
I think it definitely embodies the angst and indie rocker, whether it's, you know, punk rock or, you know, the way indie music is today. It's kind of all over the place, but it absolutely embodies and encapsulates that that type of music that was and has been popular for decades. And it kind of I mean, the music's perfect.
I mean, that's another thing that Edgar Wright is just always so good about is his soundtracks. Are you familiar with a rock band known as Metric?
Yeah, for sure.
So Metric is the band that composed the song Black Sheep for them, which is the song that Clash at Demon Head performs at their big concert. The "Hello Again, Friend of a Friend," or that song. I think Brie Larson maybe performs it for the movie, but Metric is the band that composed that song for them.
Nice.
And as far as I can tell, now go ahead.
I was looking at the soundtrack. Oh wow. Okay, so man, I should have done my research here. I didn't realize the names that were connected to the soundtrack. So We Are Sex Bomb. How do they say it? We are Sex Bomb. Oh my mom, gee. I don't know.
Sex Bomb.
OMB. Sex Bomb.
Yep, We Are Sex Bomb.
That was written by Beck.
Yeah, Beck did a lot of stuff for this movie. He did a cover of the Ramona song too.
Yeah, Garbage Truck was written by Beck. I heard Ramona sing was Frank Black. Wow. Yeah. I mean, I obviously know Beck, but so yeah, it's not all original music, but a lot of it was written for the movie. I mean, there's like a Bob Dylan song in there. Wow, interesting. I should have done. I totally bombed on the music part of this podcast today. I should have done more research. Wow, I'm just now learning that Beck was heavily involved in the soundtrack. That's pretty cool, and I love Beck. How I didn't know that? I guess I'm an idiot. I wasn't paying enough attention, but yeah, and it makes sense, right? Because again, the music is phenomenal.
Yeah, awesome. I mean, it's the songs are really great, and there's also a lot of great jokes that come with the music too. Because like you have the one Battle of the Bands contest they go to, where I think is it like Crash and the Boys is the name of one of the bands they're competing against, and they have a girl drummer, and they're like, "Is that one of the boys?" And they're like, "Yes." Our first song is called "I'm So Sad," so very, very sad.
This one goes to the guy up there that won't stop talking. I hate you and I want you to die. Something like that. That shit was great.
Yeah, it's a lot of like great jokes about the punk rock scene and that type of music.
Here's some cool trivia too. I'm just seeing off my screen. Edgar Wright showed filmmakers Quentin Tarantino, Jason Reitman, and Kevin Smith a rough cut of the film during the editing process, to which they responded very positively. So that's cool.
Yeah, I think this is a movie that a lot of like film people adore it for its creativity and just the way that it uses the medium, I think, in an inventive way that we hadn't really seen before and not really seen since.
Man, let's not forget the scene where, sorry, I've cut you off there, but
no, you're good.
Where they do a whole little Seinfeld bit.
Oh, that's one of my favorite jokes.
And they got permission to use that. And like he rolls in like he's Kramer talking about how he's in love. I'd forgotten that part of the movie, so that cracked me up when that came on.
I think he says, "Let's just say someone got to second base last night," and the studio audience goes, "Woo!"
Yeah.
I love this movie. It's 2010, I think. Maybe I'm biased because we've been watching all of these movies in such quick succession, but like to go from Toy Story 3 to Inception to this, it's just reminding me how great this year was and how much I adore these movies.
Yeah, man, for sure. I mean, just some pretty remarkable films and performances that resonate to this day. 10 years later.
They still hold up, yeah. Well, let's wrap on Scott Pilgrim, and we'll get into our second in-depth review, which is Adam McKay's The Other Guys.
In the NYPD, there's the cops we look up to.
We know.
You're the best.
Hey, if I want to hear you talk, I will shut my arm and work him out like a puppet.
Real characters. And then there's the other guys.
I want to do good cop, bad cop. I come strong, and then you come in.
Got it.
I want to know everything.
Hey, I'll talk to you. You're reasonable.
You want to talk to me?
I thought you said bad cop, bad cop.
The Other Guys.
All right, Nick, you want to start us out with The Other Guys? I know this movie was on your top 5. I love this movie too.
Yeah.
Talk about why it's so great.
Yeah, I immediately fell in love with this movie, and this is a movie that I can remember seeing. It's one of those I can remember seeing in the theater. I saw this with my dad. I had been talking it up, and I think where I was living exactly, but for whatever reason, I took my dad to see it, and we loved it, man. I mean, it's a phenomenal satire. I think it's one of the best satires of the 21st century. And so basically, it's an oversaturated version of how the NYPD police are, and you have to start these two super cops played famously by Sam Jackson and Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson, and they just play these
like
ridiculous
Danson and Highsmith is there?
Yeah. In the beginning, you're kind of like, what the hell's going on? It's just this overacted, just ridiculous characters. There's like these celebrity cops in New York City that I love how, and it really does play to today with, you have a lot of this talk about defunding the police and distributing funds for, obviously not just the police, but, different parts of society that can help us, further along progress and kind of get rid of this system that we've been in for so long. So the fact that Adam McKay is kind of ahead of the game here, talking about how basically the movie starts out with these two super cops going after these drug dealers, and they go into this ridiculous gunfight. They're like shooting machine guns at the cops, and the hood of the car is coming off. They drive the car through a tour bus of people, and then The Rock takes over the tour bus, and he's driving that, and he takes that head on with the criminals, and then the car like explodes into their car, and then those cars exploded into the building behind it, and then once they
which is very pointedly Trump Tower, which they could not have.
Oh wow, is that really?
They could not have known back then, but I noticed
Holy
that
shit.
when I was watching it this most recent time, and I was like,
amazing.
That's very funny.
Yeah, and then the whole shtick there is that they got the criminals, right? They apprehended them, but it was for like what? How much weed? Like a very little amount of marijuana, and they caused $12 million in damage to the city.
I think they said like barely a misdemeanor.
Yeah, and they ask them if they're concerned about that, and they just kind of go into like, who the Rock is dating. That there's a rumor going around that he's dating
Kim Kardashian.
Yeah,
I'm not at liberty to discuss that, but the answer is yes.
So yeah, just this completely ridiculous intro with these super cops, and they're obviously the celebrities and the ones that everyone in their department wants to follow and be like, and they're renowned to be these great detectives, and then they suddenly die from jumping off a building straight onto concrete, thinking that they were going to land in some bushes that I don't even see.
That scene makes me die laughing no matter how many times I watch this movie. When they turn to each other and go,
"These guys are pros." You thinking what I'm thinking, partner? Aim for the bushes.
It is.
Yes.
It's so good.
So obviously, once they pass tragically, someone has to sort of take their place in a way. So you got a lot of cops in the department that are sort of trying to position themselves to be the next celebrity cops that
the hot shots.
Exactly. So yeah, and then the story kind of reverts to these other guys, which is Will Ferrell and Mark Wahlberg. They play brilliantly. Will Ferrell's Alan Gamble and Mark Wahlberg's Terry Hoyts, and they don't get along. Mark Wahlberg's character, is this hot-headed asshole cop who just wants to get out, get some action, and Will Ferrell Alan is this very reserved accountant cop who kind of just wants to sit at the desk and crunch the numbers and work on his scaffolding violations. So it's a really funny dynamic. Mark Wahlberg and Will Ferrell have some incredible comedic chemistry in this, and I think it starts that relationship because they end up making a couple more movies together. But it's just this great satire about these two down and out cops, also narrated by Ice-T.
Yeah, that's pretty funny too.
Yeah, and it kind of goes through this. It builds on that storyline of Alan working on these scaffolding violations, and it kind of turns into a bigger story where, and again, the whole satire really is targeting the scandals like that have been all over Wall Street for the last couple decades with Bernie Madoff.
Yeah, right.
And
like
others
the Ponzi scheme. Like
exactly,
that,
the Ponzi schemes.
That's what it's ripping off of.
And it's really brilliant, man. I mean, I think it holds up really well today. It's obviously a silly movie, but also has a solid message there in the end where you kind of see where a lot of this country's money ends up, and that, that top 10%, right? And it's a sad realization. And I think, Adam McKay, this was sort of a precursor to The Big Short. That movie was this big deal that it had Oscar buzz, and
right.
This was sort of him transitioning out of, even though it was a pure, it's pure comedy gold, and it's pairing him back with Will Ferrell, which he was famously known for doing Anchorman with Will Ferrell. So this movie really, he was able to take a large budget, because this movie had to be expensive to make, and it did fairly well at the box office. I think it made like $170 million.
Pretty big hit from my memory. I remember I saw this in theaters too, and I remember it being a pretty big hit for an August release.
Yeah, for sure. And yeah, I just remember watching it with my dad in the theater, man, and I was laughing my ass off. We both found it really funny, and I had been hoping for years that there'd be a sequel, but I mean, every time I watch it again, it makes more and more sense that there isn't a sequel, because it's very much a movie of the time, and it's this big satire on like those Ponzi schemes and how corrupt Wall Street is. So just a comedy classic, really. And so many great scenes, so many great lines. Like Michael Keaton plays their Captain
Gene.
Yeah, Captain Gene.
He steals the movie, man. He
really does, man. He's every time he pops up, I got a big grin on my face, because he's constantly
all the TLC references.
Yeah, he unknowingly is referencing TLC. I mean, and they're just dumbfounded. Like, you realize that's TLC, right? And had the fact that he has 2 jobs, and he also works at Bed Bath & Beyond, and he keeps mentioning his son who's bisexual.
I wrote that line down. He says it in the beginning of the movie where he says, "I got to work a job at Bed Bath & Beyond to put a kid through NYU just so he can explore his bisexuality and eventually become a DJ." It's so funny.
And one of my favorite lines of the movie or scenes is the exchange between Mark Wahlberg and Will Ferrell, where Wahlberg is asking him to stop humming, because they sit across from each other right at their desks. So first he asks him to stop humming, and then he does, and then he just kind of like faces what he's humming, and then he asks him to stop smiling, and then Will Ferrell's like, "Now you're asking me to mask my emotions, and that I will not do." And then it turns into this whole, like, Wahlberg attacks him for when he pisses in a urinal, it sounds feminine, and all these things that he sees about Will Ferrell's character that he hates, and talks about if he was a lion, he would how does it go? It's like he's the tuna in the ocean, and then he's the lion.
If we were in the wild, I would attack you. Even if you weren't in my food chain, I would go out of my way to attack you. If I were a lion and you were a tuna, I would swim out in the middle of the ocean and freaking eat you. And then I'd bang your tuna girlfriend.
Okay, first off, a lion swimming in the ocean? Lions don't like water. If you'd placed it near a river or some sort of fresh water source, that makes sense. But you find yourself in the ocean, 20-foot waves, I'm assuming it's off the coast of South Africa, coming up against a full-grown 800-pound tuna with his 20 or 30 friends, you lose that battle. You lose that battle 9 times out of 10. And guess what? You've wandered into our school of tuna, and we now have a taste of lion. We've talked to ourselves. We've communicated and said, you know what? Lion tastes good. Let's go get some more lion. We've developed a system to establish a beachhead and aggressively hunt you and your family. And we will corner your pride, your children, your offspring.
How are you going to do that?
We will construct a series of breathing apparatus with kelp We'll be able to trap certain amounts of oxygen. It's not going to be days at a time, but hour 45, no problem. That will give us enough time to figure out where you live, go back to the sea, get more oxygen, and then stalk you. You just lost your own game. You're outgunned and outmanned.
It's just so good, man. Like, their chemistry is so great, and it makes me laugh. Mark Wahlberg's his facial expressions, man, when Will Ferrell says shit, it just kills me. I think this is kind of when Mark Wahlberg was kind of getting into more comedy too, so you kind of got to see his
I think this was one of the first ones. This is a movie that like a lot of comedies, I feel like when I revisit them, I like them less because I'm not as like surprised by the jokes. But this is one that I feel like every time I watch it, I like it more because I'm catching new layers to the humor that I didn't maybe see the first time.
Right.
And it's really great in that regard because a lot of the jokes are just like, really cleverly written. I think that the running bit about we talked about toxic masculinity with Scott Pilgrim. The Mark Wahlberg character Terry has a lot of toxic masculinity, and the movie is commenting on that a lot because he's like repeatedly making fun of Will Ferrell for liking Little River Band and other things that he deems to be feminine. There's also the really funny running bit about how he learned to do all of these feminine things in his youth so that he could make fun of people that knew how to do them, like the ballet sequence.
Yeah. Sarcastically learn how to dance.
And then at the ending where it says how he eventually gets married to his girlfriend and he played harp at their wedding because he learned how to do it to make fun of the fairy that lived down the street.
Yeah, man.
Just really funny way of deconstructing the negative elements of like that sort of personality. And then of course like the element about Will Ferrell as this giant womanizer who's got Eva Mendes as his wife, and every hot woman that sees him is just like immediately drawn to him. And Mark Wahlberg is perplexed by this.
Yeah, the dynamic of him and his wife, played by Eva Mendes, is strange. Like he's kind of abusive, like emotionally to her, which is a little awkward and weird. I don't know how well it plays 10 years later, but you find out why he's like the way he is, and his whole background of accidentally becoming a pimp in college, like, and taking on the persona of Gator. Yeah, it's funny, man. It's funny. It's and Eva Mendes is absolutely wonderful too, and she is. She plays to Will Ferrell's strangeness so well.
I think that like the movie definitely doesn't. His behavior is abusive, and the movie's very much on the side of this is wrong and ridiculous the way he behaves.
Yeah.
But he definitely like eventually makes amends for his behavior. I don't know if it like fully explores just how shitty it is, but
well, and also again, it's sort of
works.
Yeah, I think it's I don't know if it's kind of poking fun or making a comment on maybe the way it is for some wives who have their husbands come home from a hard day of being a cop and all the hardships that they go through, and maybe sometimes they just like take it out on the ones they love a little bit there, because it's not an easy job, right? So I'm not sure where McKay was going with that part of the storyline, but he made it really funny.
Yeah, you see there's a nice like transition to Adam McKay's career, because obviously he's someone that starts with SNL, and that's where he kind of builds his relationship with Ferrell, because he's a writer for that show while Ferrell is on it, and the two of them develop this partnership that leads to Anchorman and it leads to Step Brothers. But I've heard many people say how like Talladega Nights, in this maybe not so subtle way, is a satire on the George W. Bush era of U.S. history. Like that's his satire making fun of the culture that built around the Bush administration. And then the other guys is his it's his satire towards a lot of the behavior that would lead to the economic crash of 2008. And then with The Big Short, he makes his like actual dramatic satire about that very topic. But he found ways to like progress what he wanted to do, which is, I think, make these movies that were comedic, but also like about a serious issue and trying to like shed some light on it in a satirical way. And he like slowly progresses his way, and the other guys is kind of the perfect blend of the two in being like silly and over the top while also having something to say.
Yeah, absolutely, man. I think he's only gotten stronger as a filmmaker.
I'm gonna be curious to see what his Trump movie is once
you think he's gonna
once
do
the
that?
dust settles on this. He feels like someone that would. He did a Dick Cheney movie, so he's, it's obviously, I feel like it's material that he's kind of interested in.
Yeah, man. God, I don't know. I don't know if I could watch a Trump movie, to be honest, after living. I lived
After
through
living
it. So
it.
it's like, ugh, be a tough
Kind of
watch.
tough. That was the thing about Vice. I wasn't a big fan of Vice. It was one of like the weaker of Adam McKay's movies, I thought.
I thought it was good. The performances were good, but yeah, it was hard to watch.
Yeah, it definitely. I don't have as strong a memory of that time because I was younger, but he definitely has a good way of capturing the moment, and I think he does so with this movie. On top of still holding up as funny to this day. You have any other like lines or moments that you want to call out before we go to the next thing?
There's so many. Honestly, it's kind of hard for me to.
Pinpoint.
When there's a movie like this that has so many lines and funny parts that they all just flow together like this, I have a hard time just remembering all the great ones. But there is a moment that always sticks out to me that I love, and it's a very quick thing. And I think you said you mentioned the thing with how one of the other cops played by
Rob Riggle.
Yeah, Rob Riggle, and
I think Damon Wayans Jr. is his partner.
Damon Wayans Jr. Yeah.
Yeah.
Those two guys have a couple of great moments, and I know there's one you liked a lot with the line. Go ahead.
Yeah, they're like in the car driving to a crime scene, and the Damon Wayans character's like, "So what'd you do next?" And he goes, "Well, what do you think I did? I ripped the belt off my neck and shot my way out of there." And he goes, and then the Damon Wayans character goes, "Damn, what a story!" And the Riggle character's like, "I know, bar mitzvahs, right?"
Yeah, dude,
it's such a silly thing. But
yeah, a great cut to like the middle of their conversation where you're just like, wait, what?
What are they talking about?
But then later in the movie, in that final sequence where they go on that big car chase to get to the bank before they can make the transfer for the $32 million. There's that moment where Riggle and Wayans Jr. are giving like a talk to these elementary school kids about what they do, and they get the call about the chase that's going on, and Riggle's like, pass up the guns, like the kids have the guns in their hands, like they're doing show and tell with their guns, and then they ask one of the kids if they want to go on a ride along. and I feel like so this movie I feel is heavily inspired by Naked Gun, the Naked Gun movies. I think there's a lot of moments where, but there's that one shot, man, where they're like trying to get involved with the car chase, and the young girl's in the back just getting thrown around like she's getting thrown around, man, like, and she's not wearing a seatbelt, and it just kills me every time it happens. Like I look forward to it, and it's like very good throwback to like the Naked Gun movies. It just kills me.
I also love those movies. Those are like some of like police satire is just some of the best satire to me.
Exactly, man. Like Police Academy and Naked Gun, and
I guess sort of like the origin story of this is that Adam McKay was having dinner with Will Ferrell and Mark Wahlberg, and he noticed a chemistry between them just from like their dinner conversation. And he like went to his producer and was like, I don't know what the movie is, but we got to do a buddy cop film with these two guys. And it just kind of like spawned from that, just that like he noticed at dinner they had chemistry together. But yeah, it's definitely a classic, and every character has some great moments. We already brought up Michael Keaton, and like I could tell you every single moment of his in the movie is like one of my favorite moments.
Yeah, he's gold, dude. Absolute gold.
I think he has a moment at the funeral for The Rock and Samuel L. Jackson where the cops are like fighting, kind of like in like a tussle on the floor, and he like runs in to break it up, and like the conventional way that scene would be played is he like confronts the officers in a very aggressive way, but because it's a funeral, he runs up, he's like, hey, we gotta knock this off right now. And he's whispering, and it's just like, it's not even like funny dialogue, but like the way he delivers it is funny.
Yeah, and there's a point in the movie where Will Ferrell's character he gets tricked into doing a desk pop.
Yeah.
which is where the other cops convince him that it's like an initiation in the precinct where you have to shoot your gun in the office. So he does it. And of course it's ridiculous. And the captain's like, no, give me your gun. For now, I'm going to give you a wooden gun. And then eventually that wooden gun gets taken away by one of the criminals. And when it's returned, Keaton gives it back to him, and he's like, someone went through the trouble of putting a nice finish on the gun. You should thank them. It's like got a nice mahogany shine to it or something. I don't know what they did. It's like the fact that someone went through the trouble to like shine his wooden gun for him. It's just, oh man, incredible. Just a great writing, man.
Yeah, and he plays every moment so perfectly. Like the moment where the Ferrell character gets shot in the arm, and Michael Keaton like comes up to him. Like we've seen in so many cop movies where the cop is like wounded and someone's trying to like attend to them and take care of them. And there's like nothing going on. And Will Ferrell's like, I'm going to doze off a little bit. And Michael Keaton goes, can we get some help over here? The man's
He's dying. He's dying over here. He's dying. And then when he gets up, he's got like a bad knee. He's like, I got a bad knee. And he just uses his face as like a support. Man.
Yeah, I could talk about him for hours, how good he is in this movie. But
yeah, he's just his comedic timing with delivering lines, man. If they're written, because that role was clearly written for him. There's no way it wasn't. Like McKay wrote that for Michael Keaton, and like when he's when he's talking to the cops about how much they keep messing up, and Will Ferrell keeps calling him Gene. He's like, it's Captain. I'm your captain, and he calls him Captain Gene. He's like, I'm not. It's not Captain Gene. It's just Captain. I'm not. I'm not some kid's. I don't have a kids show. I'm not Captain Gene. It's just Captain. This is so perfect, man. I love it. So
it kind of reminds me of like Tom Cruise in Tropic Thunder a little bit, where it's this like traditionally dramatic or action actor that just like comes into this comedy and kind of steals every scene that he's in.
Yeah, totally. I mean, it's again like another great satire, right? So, yeah, dude, I wish I need more Keaton. Like, I always want more Keaton. It's cool.
One of my favorites.
I listened to the rewatchables on Mr. Mom, which is great. Like, I love that movie so much. It's like an early '80s movie about a guy that loses his job, and then his wife gets a job, and he ends up staying at home with the kids while she can go pursue her career. And he's thrown into all these different situations with the kids that he's never dealt with before. And it's just such a perfect movie for him. But they talk about how him and Tom Hanks were the actors, right, of that time. And that role was originally supposed to go to Tom Hanks, but instead Tom Hanks went off and did like Splash. So you had Keaton doing Mr. Mom. And those two, their careers really like paralleled each other in a lot of ways. Like Keaton did this, and Hanks did that, but then Hanks went on this like crazy 90s like run of where he was like on all these Oscar winning movies, and he was winning Oscars, and where Keaton was still kind of Keaton was still sort of in the background doing those like Keaton type roles, and he had a much like kind of like a chiller life outside of acting. You know, he wasn't really in the limelight a lot, and he didn't really care to be like one of those big celebrities. But I always said, man, I'm like, if I had to choose a path of actor, you know, like if I was going to be, you know, go Tom Hanks' path, or if I was going to be Michael Keaton, I would absolutely go Keaton, dude. I love Keaton. There's a big soft spot in my heart for Michael Keaton, and I just wish
he's just he's like just the right level of megastar. Like never got like overwhelmingly famous.
Yeah.
But was just like really, I mean, maybe when he was Batman it was a little bit different, but his recent comeback I've enjoyed a lot. Like he had that run where back-to-back years he was in the movie that won Best Picture, where it was Birdman and Spotlight. I wish he would have won the Oscar for Birdman. I mean,
I know, man. I was rooting for him hard.
I just wanted him to have an Oscar.
Well, I feel like the other guys is it not like kind of the beginning of his comeback? I feel like when I saw him and the other guys, I was like, fuck, Michael Keaton, finally, like he's back. Where you been? I know he did like, what was he in, like Hotel Rwanda, or he was in something like big.
It's definitely HBO. It's the start of it for sure, because we talked about it a couple months ago. He's also in Toy Story 3, and he's really funny in that as the Ken doll, but you don't recognize that as Michael Keaton right away. But he has this great 2010 run where in Toy Story 3 and the other guys, he's really funny. Like he's, you know, kind of steals both those movies in a lot of ways. But he doesn't do a ton between like 05. He's the lead.
I think it was Live from Baghdad I was thinking of. I don't know why I said Hotel Rwanda, but
he had 05 to 10, like nothing really going on there.
Well, nothing. I mean, really, dude, there's really nothing between Jackie Brown. I mean, yeah, Desperate Measures is awesome. Highly recommend that movie, but it wasn't a terribly popular movie.
Yeah.
Out of Sight, amazing movie. But
he's kind of a cameo in that.
But then, yeah, what he's doing, like The Simpsons. I don't even want to talk about Jack Frost. Like, screw that. He's The Simpsons, Frasier. I mean, Live from Baghdad, I think, was kind of a big deal at the time. And then
Nick, in relation to Jack Frost, did you know that Snow Dad is better than No Dad?
Oh man, is that your first dad joke of your?
That's the tagline of the movie Jack Frost.
Yeah.
No Dad is better than No Dad.
Oh man, yeah, I remember that movie and wanting no part of it, but that's a great tagline.
That is where Michael Keaton kind of starts his dissension, I think, is after Jack Frost.
Yeah. And then he has some stuff in 30 Rock, and he's in that RoboCop remake. He's obviously Birdman, and he gets on a roll here in the 2010s. The Founder was like a big deal. I like that movie. It was good.
I liked it too. And then I don't know if did you watch the Spider-Man movie that he's in?
Yeah. I thought he was.
He's really good in that. One of the better Spider-Man villains for sure.
Yeah, because you kind of sympathize with him, like why he's the way he is and why he's kind of pissed off and kind of wants to, buck the system. So yeah,
I'm super excited for this year. He's going to be in the next Aaron Sorkin film called The Trial of the Chicago 7. And that movie's just got a loaded cast. It's like Sacha Baron Cohen, Eddie Redmayne, Michael Keaton, Mark Rylance. I mean, it's Joseph Gordon-Levitt. That movie is going to have
cool.
a really great cast that's going to go. I think it's going to go to Netflix in October. So
wow.
I'm excited for that for sure. But he's had a nice little comeback, and I'm always happy to see him pop up. And like the other guys, he's definitely. I think for like my own personal nominations, like if we talk at the end of this year, like what our favorite performances are of 2010, I might have given him an Oscar for the other guys. Like I think he's that good in the movie.
And I totally agree. And I'm still holding on hope that he will one day reprise Beetlejuice and they'll make another movie.
Oh, he's so good as Beetlejuice.
And it's such a timeless role. He could easily play that again because it was all makeup in the original, and he's like supposed to be like dead anyway. So
right.
I mean, it doesn't really matter what your age is. I mean, he's only like 7, and he's in his early 70s, so he's still got some magic left in him. And then I don't know if you've heard this, but he's also rumored to reprise his Batman role as Bruce Wayne in the next Flash movie.
Is he really?
Yeah, they've been talking about it.
They've teased him for a long time coming back in some of these movies.
Yeah, I mean they're shooting. Aren't they shooting Flash, or they were shooting Flash? Now I know they have some production done on it already, and it's got a good director behind it too. It's the same guy that directs. He's done Id and Mama, and yeah, I think that could be something pretty cool.
Yeah, he's got another movie that's coming out this year called Worth that I'm seeing Michael Keaton does, and it's got Stanley Tucci, which those are two of my favorite. I love Stanley Tucci as well, so that'll be interesting to see if that's any good. But yeah, like now that we've talked about Michael Keaton for a while,
screw Will Ferrell, dude. Top 5 Michael Keaton. No.
I thought it'd be a good opportunity since we had it. We talked about the other guys, and Eurovision just came out this month, to kind of just do a quick shooting off of our top 5 Will Ferrell movies before we close off this month's episode. So why don't you just list your top 5, starting with number 5?
Okay, man. Start with number 5. Well, gosh, number 5. I'll put Step Brothers at number 5.
Step Brothers is my number 2. I mean that movie is just so near and dear to my heart because it was, this is also like an age thing. That came out at an age where I was just so ripe for that movie and how ridiculous it is. And I definitely watched that thing, God, probably like 10 or 15 times in the first couple of years on DVD, just because I wanted to like get all of those jokes sewn into my memory. But yeah, that's one of my favorites for sure.
Yeah, I'd probably get a lot of flack from a lot of people with putting that at number 5, but that's just where I placed it. Am I going to keep going? You want me to do?
Yeah, go ahead. I'll do my 5. So my 5 is The Other Guys.
Okay.
Yeah, which I love all these movies in my top 5, and I'll say an honorable mention. I didn't feel comfortable putting it in my top 5 because it's not necessarily a Will Ferrell live action performance. It is for like one scene, but it's the Lego Movie. That's a movie. That's a movie I like a lot, and he's a big part of it. But it's like a voice performance. So I'll give that an honorable mention, and then The Other Guys is my number 5. I won't talk about it more because we just talked about it for forever. So
yeah, gosh, and then I guess I hadn't ranked these yet. I guess I'd put Old School at number 4.
Okay. Is that also an Adam McKay? No, that's a Todd Phillips.
Todd Phillips.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Old School is funny. The Bed Bath and Beyond joke is something that like my dad and I still joke to each other to this day. The whole thing about how he's got a nice little Saturday planned where he's going to go to Home Depot.
And that one for me was big because that came out when I was in high school. So that obviously had a big impact on me. No, well, okay, I was a year out. So my year after graduating from high school, that's
the perfect age for that movie.
Yeah, it was like it's like that and Wedding Crashers, man. Those were like within a couple of years of each other.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. Can you count Wedding Crashers as one of these movies?
So I counted it in my top 5 mainly because I think he plays such an integral role in why I love that movie. Like it's kind of like what we said about Michael Keaton, how in The Other Guys he like comes in and steals the movie when he is in it, and like Will Ferrell's one scene in Wedding Crashers, it's actually a couple scenes, but
yeah, I mean it's big.
It's such a big part of why that movie is funny, and it might be, for me, the scene with Owen Wilson in his mother's living room where he's like yelling for the meatloaf. It's one of his funniest scenes ever.
I think we've all screamed meatloaf. Ma, where's the meatloaf? When we want meatloaf.
Yeah.
So.
Died in a hang gliding accident. What an idiot. Yeah, Chaz is a great Will Ferrell character. Wedding Crashers was my number 3. So now we've hit I think we've hit 3 of my 5. What else you got?
Yeah, which Wedding Crashers is not. I'm not going to put it in my top 5.
Yeah, I get that because it's more of it's like cameo, but he's great in it.
Yeah, I think my top 5. It's funny because I'm going to go ahead and put the other guy's number 3.
Okay.
Yeah, I guess I love the more dramatic Will Ferrell. Like, I think he's a really good actor when he wants to be. I mean, we all know his comedic side. I think he's he's a brilliant comedian. He's one of the greatest comedians of our lifetime. I could watch him in anything, really. Even if it's bad, I could still watch, even though sometimes I've watched some of his movies and I've thought they were absolutely awful. But he's got some movies that are really, really good as far as just storytelling and his acting. And he always has really, really great chemistry with his other actors that he is in some of these movies with. So I think that must go to show that he's just a really great person to work with, which is why he has so many of these really iconic movies. But
now are one of these, this is your number 2?
Number 2 for me is one that kind of flies under the radar, and that's Stranger Than Fiction.
That's what I thought you would say.
I love that movie. It's always been one of my favorite movies of his, and it just is like, that one's kind of near and dear to my heart because I think it's a really great sort of I've always been a sucker for coming of age, and his chemistry in that movie with oh my gosh, I'm blanking on her name right now.
Maggie Gyllenhaal.
Maggie Gyllenhaal, yeah.
Yeah.
So good. And I thought it's narrated so well. Also, the soundtrack is done by one of my favorite bands, Spoon.
Mm-hmm.
They have a heavy hand in that soundtrack. And
yeah, Emma Thompson. It's a good cast in that movie.
Yeah, and it's just such a sweet movie. And tugs at the old heartstrings a little bit, which is also the same reason I chose my number 1. I don't know if you want to do your number 2 first, but what are you on? 3 or 4?
I'll say before I go into, I've done 2, 3, and 5 because I said Step Brothers, Wedding Crashers, and the other guys. But on the note about serious Will Ferrell movies, have you seen Downhill?
That's the most recent one, right?
Yeah.
Nah, I didn't watch it.
I recommend it a lot. I did not think it didn't get great reviews, and I, was kind of hesitant because of that, but I watched it, and it's him and Julia Louis-Dreyfus, and it's a dramedy based off a well-known French film called Force Majeure.
Yeah, I know the history behind the original film and everything.
Yeah. And I really loved it. Caitlin and I watched it probably in the first couple of weeks of quarantine, and I thought it was a nice return to form for him in the sort of stranger than fiction type of role where there's like kind of a sadness to the character, and he kind of plays that really well in terms of a character that has some like humor and lightheartedness to him, but is also underneath pretty sad, and he does that well in this movie. So yeah, on that note, my number 4 is Zoolander.
Oh yeah, we all love Zoolander for sure.
Which is another movie that he's a supporting role in. It's not necessarily a Will Ferrell movie, but that movie is an all-time classic for me. It's funny every time I watch it, and I think everyone is just really great in that movie. So yeah, moving off of that, I think both of us are yet to say our number 1. I'll let you go first.
My number 1 is Elf. I love Elf so much. Every time I watch it, I end up in tears in the end. It's just happy tears. It's It's one of the greatest,
classic.
if not the greatest, Christmas movie. There's a reason to watch it every year, which I do watch it every year at Christmas. It's just the most perfect written, most perfectly acted. It's just like one of those like lightning in a bottle sort of Christmas movies that I could watch that movie 100, 200, 500 times. It never gets old. Every year, I love it so much. And again, the chemistry he has with the actors.
Zoe Deschanel.
Zoe Deschanel. I need to get better at pulling up these cast members. James Caan, Bob Newhart. I mean, the cast is insane with some really legendary actors in there, and then Zoe Deschanel for sure. She's great. It's just, it warms my heart. I love it so much. So it's absolutely my number one.
It's one of my favorite Christmas movies. It didn't quite make my top 5. I think it was like right there on the edge with the Lego Movie in terms of, and I don't know if maybe I'm desensitized to Elf from watching it every year for the past 15 years or whatever. I still love it, but it's just like I watch it for such specific reasons to like bring in the holiday season that I don't, for some reason, when I think about a Will Ferrell movie, that's not what pops to top of mind. My number one is, of course, Anchorman: The Legend of Ron Burgundy.
It didn't even make my top 5. Isn't that messed up?
It is pretty messed up. My number one and 2, like on barely making your top 5, which I guess the same could be said for the reverse because I don't have Elf or Stranger Than Fiction. But I adore Anchorman. I saw that movie in theaters when I was 12 years old, and I laughed so hard that I fell out of my chair, and I laughed so hard that I fell out of my chair because of a joke that involved a boner, which says something about me being 12 years old.
Yeah.
But I think that's maybe his funniest performance, and he does that character so well. It reminds me of a lot of the characters he used to do on SNL, where it would become these like really over the top figures that kind of had a very specific way of speaking. But that movie just has, on top of Will Ferrell, to have Paul Rudd and Steve Carell before they became these mega comedic superstars that they would become, and both of them are really funny. And obviously Steve Carell as Brick Tamblyn is one of the most memed comedic characters of the past 20 years because of I Love Lamp. But I love Anchorman. It's honestly, it's my favorite Will Ferrell movie, and it's maybe my favorite pure comedy ever, just because of the way that it's tied into my life. But
I mean, don't get me wrong. Anchorman is incredible. It's brilliant. It's a classic. I think I left it out of my top 10 on purpose just to like
be different,
just to not have Anchorman. Yeah, because I mean, it's obvious, right? I mean, of course, Anchorman deserves to be in my top 5, but I think for me, and I saw that in the theater. It was a big deal for me in high school, and I quoted the whale's vagina thing a million times. I think for me, it probably just got a little played out. I think I saw it too many times, and then I wasn't the biggest fan of the sequel, so maybe that kind of turned me off to.
I didn't like the sequel
my top
either.
5.
Yeah,
I mean, it was fine. It was just like an over bloated, like fan service movie that they didn't really have much of a script for, which I never am a fan when it's just like too many things are unscripted, and I don't know. But and again, I think at that point it just had gotten played out for me. But no, I mean, dude, Anchorman is like has every right to be your number one, and it's one of the greatest comedies ever made.
Yeah, I love it, and I think one of the only like major ones we didn't mention was Talladega Nights, which is like his
good,
other
I thought about that one too. Yeah.
His other Adam McKay movie. But that's always the one that I've kind of been the most mixed on, just because it just doesn't hold the same classic level in my head that some of these other ones do. But he's definitely had a hell of a run there in like the late 90s until 2010 with the other guys, and then fell off maybe a little bit in terms of the quality of what he was putting out there, but definitely for the time, one of like the all-time iconic comedic stars.
Yeah, man, he's one of a kind. And, you know, it's like Kat was sitting with me when I started The Other Guys, and she was watching it with me for a little bit. She was just like, she's dying laughing because she just is like, I could watch him just anything. He's just so funny. His facial expressions, his comedic timing, he just really knows how to make you laugh, man.
Are you super familiar with any of his like famous SNL characters?
Oh yeah, I mean, I grew up watching all of his SNL sketches, so for sure.
Yeah, I think my favorite of his is Harry Carey. You remember any of those sketches that he would do?
Oh yeah, dude.
He was.
If the moon were cheese, I'd eat it. I'd smother it in mustard and relish. It'd be delicious.
And wash it down with a tall, cool Budweiser.
Yeah, man.
He was great as that. He was great as Harry Carey. He was a great George W. Bush. It's a shame that he didn't get to do it for longer because he left the show. He's just really great.
I'll tell you my favorite SNL sketch, and it's the one my friends and I quote the most, is I don't know if you remember, you have the greatest hits, so you probably do, but he did a sketch with Garth Brooks where he was the devil, and Garth Brooks is like plays this songwriter that like can't think of a hit. If he gets this one hit, you know, he thinks he can make it, so he sells his soul to the devil, which is played by Will Ferrell, and Will Ferrell starts, you know, playing songs for him that he can play, and we always quote the Fred Slacks is the guy named Fred, and he's got a pair of slacks. Ooh, Fred's got slacks on the boulevard. and Garth Brooks is like, that's terrible, man. What? No, that's not going to be a hit. And Will Ferrell's like, what? No, Fred Slacks is a winner. So yeah, dude, I love that.
That's a great
sketch.
one. I think
like,
the one that my family and I would always quote is the "I drive a Dodge Stratus."
Oh,
every time we would get in an argument at the dinner table, someone would always stop the argument to go, "I drive a Dodge Stratus," because it's just so silly, but it really works in that sketch for sure.
Yeah, man, living legend.
All right, well, we got to do some good August 2010 talk and talk about Will Ferrell, who's not necessarily completely relevant to the topic of 2010, but had a big movie come out, so any excuse to talk about him, I will take it. We're gonna be off for a bit from recording. I mean, well, this will come out in a couple of weeks, but the next time we get on the mic, we will be full in on dad mode. So we will be different people in a way. By the next time you hear us,
same but different. Same but different.
Transformed, if you will. All right, guys. Well, we will talk to you next time in September, and I'm sure we'll have some good stuff to talk about then. Until then, we will see you next time. Thanks for listening.
Peace.
Elsewhere on We Made This. Motion pictures.
It feels like a film that is a balm. And I never thought that I would feel that about a Tarantino movie. You know, it is by far his nicest film. You know, if you look at it from that context.
So I've seen it 4 times now. I saw it on release on the opening weekend. I saw it then over Christmas. And then I saw it about 6 weeks ago. I watched it. And then I watched it again last night because we decided to do this. And I really like this film. I think the things you're talking about, I think it's a great hangout film.
Yeah.
And that's what Tarantino's described some of his films as.
Right in the childhood.
They don't see the aliens because they're always in the tripods. And I think the setting where where post-apocalyptic, they've lost all their technology. Yeah. It's become very popular, like very, very popular recently. But this is still prime for a remake, I think. I'd love to see that.
I could see it, yeah, especially with shows that you see now that are on obviously Doctor Who's come back and stuff like that. all those dystopian ones like Westworld and all that jazz. Seems like it could be if it's the right person. Like I get like the BBC could do it.
It's fundamentally British. I wouldn't want an American remake.
No HBO.
Well, unless it's HBO.
Pick a disc.
When watching Thrice, how hard was it to not think of, if I was behind the same desk, I'll be...
Oh, gigs are ruined for me forever. Yeah, it's... there'll be something that, like a reverb will happen and I'll go, oh, that was nice. And then all my mates are like, Ben, stop it. Just enjoy the gig. The first thing I'll do is I'll always just poke my head over and just go, oh, you're using a Midas Pro 2? Interesting. Okay, cool. Oh, yeah, Digico SD7. Oh, nice. And then the first thing I do and take a picture of it, and they're like, Ben, you're such a nerd. Yes, I know. But I love it, and that's kind of part of the enjoyment these days.
Check out all of these shows and more on the We Made This podcast network.